is 7:15 and I am now calling the meeting to order. Do I see, oh yeah, where's Joyce? Ah,
She's not here yet, but she just answered an email, so she must
okay,
be logging in soon.
okay, fine. We'll be on the lookout for her. Okay, are there any issues that anyone has for possibly amending the agenda under the 48-hour rule? Hearing none. We will now just proceed with the agenda as is. And at some point, we could find out whether we need to vote to begin the meeting or to approve the agenda, but we will continue with what we've been doing as is. Okay, the first item on the agenda is land management, which I thought we had something that maybe Kelly would want to talk about, but I don't see him here, so we might just move on to another issue there. Okay, I see Joyce coming in here now. Then we will move on to other items here. I will just do a quick check to see. I see we have some guests here. If either what I see here as Bill, Doug, or Tashmu partners, are any of you here for items other than the 2 RDAs for 30 Mcgregor or for 3 Prospect Street? And if you want to let us know what you're here for, then I can maybe adjust our schedule accordingly.
I'm kind of here generally, but also specifically interested in the Greenwood, Washington Avenue stuff,
Okay,
Washington
fine.
Street. Yeah.
And I see Katie Shannon here. Maybe that's something we'll do sooner than later. I see Doug's having trouble getting into audio. But I'm assuming anybody else. Okay, then given that I imagine what I know from Katie and Bill here expressed his interest, since we have a little gap here, I'll move up the issue that we have under site visits. Let's see here. Courtney, can you send, I just see an email from Deborah that she needs the Zoom link.
Yeah, I got it.
Okay, fine. Okay, the update is on the on 30 Washington Street, 0 Washington Street, which happens to be the same as 108 Coolidge, is that there's going to be a site visit by DEP, probably on the 13th of September, and with rain dates and weather dates on the 12th or the 14th. And they are going to be looking to, with a focus, excuse me, as an email from them, their focus will be on making sure that none of the test sites are in resource areas. They are not going to delineate the wetlands or approve or check the delineation of the wetlands. And so their superseding order of conditions will be limited to the various test sites that have been proposed and ensuring that they are done in a well-practiced manner and that they're not in a resource area. So subsequent to that, we've had filings from the applicant for what's called an ANRAD, abbreviated notice for resource assessment determination. So they are now applying back to the commission to have the wetland lines for those projects approved. So that is back in the process at the commission. And so we will be opening the hearings for that process at our next meeting on the 15th. And then sometime after the 15th, we'll be working on checking the wetland line delineation so that the end product of that will be an approved wetland line that they can use for any of their future project work. And so that is the status there. I don't know if there's any questions from anybody in the public or from the commission. Okay,
Hi, Michael. It's Katie. I do have a quick question for you.
sure.
What does that process look like when the commission takes on the wetland delineation? Is it similar to what's happened so far, which is you do a site visit just as the commission, or do you bring in any other resources to do that? What does that look
We will
like?
decide that at when we open the hearing next week, but most likely it'll be, I mean, the spectrum would be that we have our agent walk the line with the applicant and check each of the flags to see that they're all in the correct position, as well as to walk the entire site to make sure all of the different resource areas have been identified and are therefore marked on a plan. So it's basically an extensive site walk that'll be done by either the agent or a consultant that works directly for the commission, if we take that route. And then based on that walk there, and then there'll be any discussion if there need to be changes and whatever else and worked out, there'll then be then we will have a final plan with all of the wetlands, the different types delineated with their buffer zones. Would be then on a plan that they would work for going forward on any other project work that they have. But it's basically a site walk and then meeting just to go over what all the changes and that we want, if any, and then approval of that plan.
Thank you. I appreciate the explanation.
Sure, it's a simpler process than some because it's mainly just mostly field work. Unless there's discussion about issues of different wetland resources, like some areas that are land subject to flooding, there might be some calculations that need to be done to show what the area of that resource is in particular. So there might be some other work that's beyond just site work in terms of certain calculations for how those resource areas are defined. Okay. Any other questions from anybody on the commission? I mean, it's a good thing that, what's that?
For the meeting or for the site visit on the 13th, I would like to try and go on that since I wasn't able to attend the prior site visit.
Okay, well, we will, it's the 10:30 is at the time, starting at Bureau, Washington, as we said. And we'll just keep everybody informed if that changes. I assume the public will probably not be allowed on that site walk as they did the last time. But I guess, and I guess for Joyce, we do have to think about at some point what resources need to have some calculations in terms of the land subject to flooding kind of work. Okay. Okay, let's see, now it's 7:24. We have a hearing at 7:30 and then a hearing at 8 o'clock for the RDAs. Other little updates on the minutes. We have two sets of minutes or two meetings minutes that we have to work on. I'm working on cleaning up the drafts for those. And so that what I'm going to try to do is not do what I do in the past where I end up reading it and cleaning up the day or two before the meeting. I'm going to try to get that done at least a week before the meeting. So the commission can read them over beforehand so that it's less time at a meeting. And people can send in, if they have track edits on the draft minutes, they can send them in to Joyce and to me and to Deborah before the meeting, if possible. And we'll try that process rather than trying to do edits online for now, just to get it going, since most people don't do that. But we'll we'll start with that for the next meeting, and then we'll go forward and see what works best. So that's where the minutes are. There is a warrant, I gather, here. When is the warrant here? What do I see here? Bills. Okay. Deborah, if you could let me know what the issues are on the warrant, what the payments are for hometown applications.
Okay. So we had some certified mails to Middlesex County Registry of Deeds, and that totaled $46.57.
Mhm.
Yeah, we had 2 hometown publication invoices, one for a total of $264 and another one for $192.
And those are those ones that would be paid by applicants? Are they related to?
Well, now that
Related to our job advertising?
no, I think those were applicant legal notice advertisings. So now that I really get the idea of applicants assuming that role, I'm gonna have to perhaps go back on these 2, Michael,
Okay,
and just
fine.
make sure to verify. Otherwise, we'd be looking for reimbursement. And the last one, that all type digital graphics, those are the signs that had been ordered, I think, some time ago. And that came to a total of $280. And I did speak to the vendor and told them we'll be picking up those signs in Framingham next week, so we have them.
Okay, those are the monuments that we then
Right,
cover the cost of when people have to do the filings. I think we've been selling them at an at cost price, if I remember.
yeah,
Okay, Yeah,
and I'm sorry.
no, okay, that's fine. Then I go check because I see the ads are many more than the 2. There's like 3 ads for the 264. You should go over that and you could talk with Joyce and or me about the fact that those are all ads, because I thought the applicants paid directly for those, but we should work on that process. So that
Yeah,
minimize the paperwork. So why don't we don't have to do it right now, but offline. You should talk with Joyce about and either Courtney or me about making sure that we're handling the legal advertising for these hearings correctly in terms of who's paying for it.
yeah, well, today I had 6 submitted legal ads, and now I get it. So
Okay.
they were
So then-
all appropriated to the correct payor.
Okay, fine. Good. Okay, so you'll fix up the other one. So we're just for today, just basically approving all the certified mail of $46.57 and the sign issue of $280 for the little monument
Correct.
there. Okay, that's good. Thank you for that. And let's now go to let's see. Any other announcements? Again, I'll repeat the fact that remember to go look into the MACC fall conference on October 15th, and I highly recommend people attend that or do some of the fundamental courses. And there, let's see. It is now 7:30. Okay, I am now opening the RDA hearing for 30 Mcgregor Street. It is somebody here for the to present. I could put the plan on my, up on the screen if that would help people. How would we like to proceed on that, Joyce, or whoever's here for the applicant?
Let me share my screen and I have some photos and some site plan.
Okay.
Are you able to see my screen?
Yep, I am.
Yep.
Yes.
All right, so the applicant originally filed an AA, an administrative request for administrative approval because they're putting 2 decks, a porch to cover the existing stairs here, and a reconfiguration and a porch at this corner of the house in this angle point. This will have 2 sonotubes, and this will be on 3 sonotubes. But I denied it because you can see in the plan they provided, they have the wetland line and they show the 100-foot buffer zone. And we can't use an AA for anything that's in the buffer zone. So they've since filed a request for determination of applicability. Again, these are tucked up into the front lawn. This is lawn right up to about this edge here. I'll show you pictures in just a moment. There's a septic system in the front yard. This is, again, all grass. I would suspect that most of the access is going to come from the driveway here. The only digging would be involved are, again, the sonotubes that they'll place under here. They will remove the existing stairs here. They're in very poor shape, and then replace it with the 2 porches. I took a picture. I'm not sure if you can. I don't know. Can you now see the pictures, or are you still seeing the?
We're still seeing the plot plan.
Hold on. So this is the. You see the pictures now?
Yes.
So they're going to take out this set of stairs here, and there's a walkway that sits between the work that they're proposing. The walkway will stay. That covered porch will sit in this area here, and then they'll be having a covered stairs, taking out these concrete steps and putting new stairs here. And you can see it's all. You can see the next picture. So there's a stone wall that runs. This is the septic system is right here. This stone wall was part of that septic system, runs along the edge, and the wetlands are tucked into this front area here, and then on the far side of the driveway. Kind of another side view. And that's what they're looking to do. If they do anything, I don't see that they're going to be having a lot of material movement. It's not like they're digging anything up that could get to the wetlands, so I'm not sure erosion control is really necessary. But mostly it's just keeping everything next to the house in the front lawn.
All right.
And that's the story.
So I guess we don't even expect any, I guess, is there anybody here from the, for 30 Mcgregor? Okay. Just wanted to see if they wanted to add anything. But I'll assume not. Or I don't hear anybody. So I guess, right, in terms of it's the erosion control doesn't seem to be a problem with runoff there. And even and it's a very small project. What was the size of the little porch that they're enclosing?
1 second.
Meanwhile, does anybody else have any questions from the commission?
Seems really straightforward.
So this, nope, that's existing. So there would be the stairs would be about the same. The roof expanse would be 9.6. And then over here, it tucks into that existing corner. This is the roof. The
Yeah,
porch
7 by
the porch sits
14.
underneath it.
How much is it actually adding to the square footage? Doesn't look like much, but
It's not much. So the roof is,
About 1,000 square, well, hold on,
well,
7 by 14 is 70,
so this is 98 square feet
right?
and just roughly,
Right.
But some of that
this
was
is
already
this is about,
Right.
it's about 100
permeable, basically.
oops,
sorry,
sorry,
Joyce, I didn't hear what you said, Joyce.
it's about 160 square feet total. Yes,
But I think but part of it had stairs, right? So part of that was already a set of concrete stairs.
both of them had stairs already.
It's
Yeah.
it's basically minor, whatever the number is, we're talking, well, under 200 square feet.
Yep.
Does anybody have any,
And all of this, I think, is outside the 50-foot
Correct.
line. It's
You're
all very close to 100,
Yep.
not quite 100 feet.
No, is the whole thing within the 100? I thought you said the whole thing was within the 100.
Oh, whole thing is within 100, they're out of the 50.
Okay.
right? Okay, do we need any, people question, I mean, are there any conditions other than access from the, do we even,
Just
do
that
we
the
have any
debris,
conditions?
yeah, just that the construction debris, like the stairs that are being removed, the concrete will be removed from site.
Mm-hmm,
No stockpiling and concrete removed from site.
okay, because, right, I don't see the need for erosion control.
How does the
Given-
stockpiling condition work? Because their driveway is within the 100-foot. I assume they would put stuff on the driveway, right?
Well, like, but what I'm saying is, not taking the concrete and leaving it on the lawn. Like they're
Sure,
gonna
sure.
break that apart, so they should break it apart and put it where how they're gonna get rid of it.
Okay.
Yeah, I guess I can't see any conditions that that we really need. I mean, and I assume it's going to be roofed over the porch, but it's even the runoff from the porch is just going to be captured in that one area there, and I don't see any erosion issues from the runoff from the little small roof there, which is just an issue for others in general. We have a concern about when you're creating impervious surface, you get the runoff and whether that could create erosion, and you worry about where the roof drainage is, but this is so small. And given that the septic system's in between, and then you have the driveway in between the other wetland, that I don't see an issue there. Okay, so the only condition is about the debris and removal and not stockpiled. Okay. I move that, does anybody else have any questions or issues before we do a motion? I move that this is a -3 with the condition specified, that the project can therefore go ahead with that.
Second,
Okay.
Remind me that -3 means we're saying it's not a significant change.
It's not going to have a significant, it will not have an impact on the resource.
Okay.
On the wetland resource is what the determination applicability is. If you did a positive, you'd say, yes, it would have an impact. And I should send you out, I'll send you out my little cheat sheet, but everybody should just read the determination of applicability form. So you could see what these numbers are. It's only a few pages long. And even I can't remember all the numbers, but they're a -1, I think, is where there's no conditions, if I recall. And the 3 just means that we have conditions. Okay, any discussion? Okay, roll call vote. Michael, I, Jacob,
Aye.
Carol,
Aye.
James, oops, I mean Courtney.
I.
You can vote James if you want. And Matt,
Aye.
Okay. 5.5. We'll give you a half vote, James. 5-0. Approved.
So there will be a signature sheet. There is a signature sheet in the blue box. If you all could go over the weekend and Monday, if you're available, and sign up.
Okay. It's 7. Now it is 7:40. And let's see, what's moving on here in our agenda. I'd like to cover a few things here. Where are we? Okay, well, I'm going to move to administrative approvals. Why don't we, I see 2 of them here and maybe there's been additional ones since. Joyce, do you want to run down?
So there, I can tell you one, I did one today for 36. One moment.
Okay, meanwhile, I'll say 15 Pleasant Street for soil testing has been approved.
No, that was denied because that's all in the, it's all in the buffer zone.
15
and
Pleasant
so
Street.
They need to file a request for determination of applicability.
Oh, for 15 Pleasant. Okay, so the agenda is incorrect. When I did it, I guess I misheard whether that one had already been done. So 15 Pleasant was, we'll have to correct that, was denied. And what was the one you were just about to talk about?
That is,
36 Ash.
thank you, 36 Ash. They're proposing to put up, this is where it's a project that's been ongoing, pool, big house addition. I had to deny this one too because their fence is, they want to put up a fence, but a deer fence and the combination of deer and regular fence. But large sections of it go through the buffer zone.
Okay,
And so because of that, I suggested they should file a request for determination.
okay. What about 2527 North Main?
That is not one that I can do.
Oh, okay. So we've not, so that is to be done.
Oh, boy.
Okay. Agent Courtney with her,
Oh,
with
God.
her trusty cohort.
I'll send James out.
Yeah, James will be, you and James can go take care of that one. I don't know if you have to buy him a donut. Okay, are there any other administrative approvals that were,
Oh, I did one.
oh yeah, what do you got?
Was the Forest Street 145?
145
Yes.
Forest, yeah,
Yes, that was it in addition to the house, and that was outside of jurisdiction.
okay, so that was approved, okay.
Yes.
Right, there was also 0 Hunting Lane. That's the one we discussed at the last meeting. And they revised the plan to show all work outside the 100-foot buffer zone. This is so that they can get back before the Board of Health meeting. And so I gave them an approval on that, so they can get on the Board of Health agenda.
Okay. I guess we'll change the agendas now to include generically based on site work up until the meeting. We'll have to put in some general clause about based on whatever sites have been visited prior to the meeting. Okay, so we have 5 of them that we made some decisions on. Is that it? Any more?
That should be it.
Okay, fine. We're done with that. Then let's see, let us go back to, okay. So something we're going to do a little bit more tonight is I want to move to the tree removal policy. We have 15 minutes before the next meeting. And then we'll do a little after the next RDA. since tonight is a relatively light agenda, I'll just alert everybody that at the next September 15th meeting, and again, you should all let us know as soon as possible if anybody can't attend the 15th meeting, that we have one NOI, and then we have, there won't be two times, there's 3 ANRADs and at least 2 RDAs. So the agenda at the next meeting has a lot more permitting activity to be reviewed. Let's see here. I'm going to just share my screen with some notes. Basically, as based on the suggestion last week, Jacob and I are supposed to come up with a more complete draft that people can have at least a week or so to review. And then we can, did you just admit that person, Courtney?
Yeah, I'm quick.
Okay. Good. Just want to make sure it happened as it flashes across my screen. Essentially, we did some work on it. Jacob did a bit of work on it, and I'm sort of reviewing some of that, and we will continue on that, but hopefully we'll have something in the next week to do it, even though yeah, I guess we still want to do it, because even though we might still have some time at the next meeting to do some, I'm trying to just squeeze it in at times. So we didn't get as far as I would have liked to, partly due to my limitations. So I'd like to just go over a few questions that came up as we've been, in particular, some of them from Jacob as he was editing the Lincoln policy. So let's go through a few questions to discuss. And I'll even bring one up, and I'll let you, Jacob, comment first if you want. All right, now, do we want to actually, do we have a, I guess, do we have a definition? I guess the definition here, I don't know what to call it. I'm going to scroll down. There's some of the work. I don't know if people can actually, is my screen too small to make
I
it
can
bigger?
read it.
I can read it.
Yeah, it's fine.
Here's the purpose of the policy. And basically, we're trying to deal with trees that either, the question is, if it's a significant risk, I guess, right, this is a little different. I guess I struggle myself with where's the line between something that this policy is, I guess something, there's 2 parts to it. One is we want to expedite the issue in case things seem more imminent. Plus, maybe we just want to simplify the process overall so that people don't have to do RDAs. So there's both for simple projects that would be clearly permitted due to their sort of risk, as well as the fact of things that just maybe need to have some quicker action. If there is some really fast action, emergency, then there's also an emergency certification that can be done. Something that's, let's say, falling right away, we can also have that option.
As I was reading through all of these, what I think we want to create something where if a regular person, not somebody with special skills, would look at a tree and say, that's going to hurt somebody, that's going to crush a house, barn, garage, etc., that there's a simple way of getting some agreement that that's what we're looking at and to make it happen. I think that's our goal, not trying to cover all cases, but if there something where anytime there's doubts or questions about how hazardous is it, refer it to the commission.
So the question is whether it's because here I'm gonna just copy this. A second. To go up to here. See, this hazardous tree definition is actually says something about the tree.
It does.
And this is different from, let's say, our working draft about. And so the question is that how subjective are we making this versus any kind of specific visible criteria and limiting it to dead and dying trees versus an alive tree. So I'd like to just bat this around. So you get Carol, and I'd also like to hear Joyce's opinion from when she actually goes out in the field and tries to deal with these things. Carol.
Yes. Yeah, I know that at one point I had that, I read through that tree manual, which I think is now back at the office. And I would be in favor of using the term hazard tree for a couple of reasons. One is, I mean, this definition is pretty clear and is less subjective. You know, it feels more objective. And the second reason is that it's kind of a term that arborists will understand. So if somebody does consult an arborist, the arborist would be able to say, oh yeah, that is a hazard tree or that is not a hazard tree. So that's what I like about actually using that term. I just think it's clear. I do worry that I agree that as much as possible, it's good to simplify and help people understand. But on the other hand, I think it can become pretty subjective with the current wording, the proposed wording.
I mean, the key is whether we include something like that phrase. And there. What do others think?
So the way the link, or I'll let other people speak first, sorry.
Oh, yeah, I mean, right.
By the way, can I ask one quick question? Sorry to extend my thing, but did Lincoln, I think Lincoln used the term hazard tree?
Lincoln did. They
But
didn't.
this is
use
from
it.
Lincoln. This thing that I've just put here is copied
So what
from
they-
Lincoln.
They had a purpose statement that didn't use the hazard tree definition, but then they had a policy section that did. So there are different portions of the document that use different terms.
Okay.
Yeah,
Thank you.
no, that's part of the issue is we have to just be clearer for ourselves and for the agent in terms of going to be actually having to implement this. I don't know, what do you think? And when I say whether anybody, whether Courtney or Matt have any comments, as well as Joyce, chime in what you think is practical.
So,
Go ahead, Joyce.
go ahead. So the few that I've gone out on, and maybe 6 or 7 of these, there was no question that the people who were looking to take down dangerous trees, they were dead. It wasn't, no one was asking to take down a live tree. That hasn't come up under this under the emergency order.
We have had plenty of people request to take down live trees, not necessarily under emergency, but in general.
True, and so this policy, it might be helpful. We talked about like to pick a number of trees, like if you'd said, so if they were live trees, you'd want to say you're taking down a live tree, then you need to plant something. Maybe that's a way that works about. If you're taking down one live tree, you have to plant X number of live trees. I mean, replacement trees, but for the hazardous one, and the emergency orders that this, we're trying to take care of this, that there was really no question. It wasn't, I'm not worried about
They were more worried about trees that were really going to be a damage to property or house or themselves.
Okay, so it seems fairly, so limiting it to this kind of dead or dying, or has a structural defect, which might be the case of a live tree that has clearly some sort of defect.
Right, so like,
That-
I remember this came up with, I think some of the trees were live and they were they were like diagonal, they were, the whole tree was like diagonal hanging out over, the yard or towards the fence or something. I mean, I think that kind of lean could be a structural defect that would categorize a live tree as, a hazard.
Okay, so we like this. This is nice and simple. We could always change this policy later. We just want to get something that deals with the ease of
Yeah,
smaller things there. And so I don't mind using the policy in a more, starting from something that's a little more narrowly defined. And then we can see whether we need to change it based on what we find in the field. Okay, so we're gonna create, whether it's, the problem I have with hazard is when you look at the arborist stuff and the forestry stuff. I mean, even the definition of hazardous versus endangering versus threatening is all over the place. But
but it's fine because
I'll look at
we'll
the
have
manual.
our own definition here.
okay, so we will have a definition. We can use the we'll have a definition, whether we change it to another term based on looking at the manual. That's like the one you talked about, Carol, just to make sure that that's the term they like using, or even whatever Rolf and the tree specialists like to use. We'll come up with a term. We'll give it a definition that has two parts. It's this sort of physical description. And then there's the issue of where it's located in terms of it being a risk or a threat to some people and or physical things. Okay, and one issue that gets a little bit much is that I guess if it can, I guess usable surfaces. I think you brought up an issue of whether about
That
the
one I'm unsure about, because I don't think we care if a tree falls on a lawn if nobody's ever there. We do care if there are people there.
right. So the question is, do we keep? I mean, a driveway, clearly cars are going back and forth and you need it for access for safety. So the issue of whether you need a lawn is, I don't know how we would. I mean, a lot of people come forward, they have like we had an example of like a play set that's in the lawn. And it can
Right.
fall on that gives it a much more focused thing there. Just how do we feel about just, because some people's lawns are much more extensive than what they use.
Well, I would be in favor of you guys, like when you work on your draft revisions, to see if you could come up with something that's a little bit more targeted rather than usable surface. Like there must be a better way to phrase it to capture what we're thinking of, like a walkway or like a play set.
Habitated areas or something like that.
Yeah,
probably.
yeah.
Or high use areas or something. Yeah, I think
Yeah.
that's,
I like that.
Okay, fine. We will, thank you for the guidance. I'm sure we will come up with something perfectly pithy. Okay, it's 7:59. Let's see. No, this is good. This one major thing that
On topic, yeah.
We'll come back to after it. I think I want to deal with the mitigation. I guess I'm trying to see if there's something very quick.
I don't think. I think all of these are going to take more than a minute.
Yeah, okay. Fine. We will now, okay, it's 8:00. We are now opening, whoops, did you admit that? Okay, person, let me stop sharing. Okay. We are now You're now opening the hearing for the RD request for determination of applicability for three, I think it's three. My screen has gotten so big here. For 3 Prospect Street. Is somebody here who wants to present for the applicant?
Yeah,
Or-
Desheng Wang representing Dan Haley. Do we have our attorney here too? But so I have the technical documents open. I can share my screen.
Sure.
Okay.
I guess who else is here on behalf of this project, just for our minutes and notes?
I think so. The owner, John Dennehy.
Okay.
Can you hear me?
Attorney Shannon.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, but you're
Hello.
causing some feedback.
But I don't know whose that was.
I took
I
care of
I
it.
assume is Dan's iPad, is that you, the two of you?
Yes.
Okay, so Dan is John Dennehy. And who is the owner, and who are you? And Dan, you're somebody too in the scheme? Oops, you're
John
mute.
is a counsel here. Is Shannon?
Dan, Dan's iPad is muted.
Desheng, maybe you can tell us who they
Okay.
are.
Yeah. So John, I don't know who Dan is, but I think it's his.
Dan Harding. Dan Harding is he does carpentry for me.
Okay.
Retired Marine.
Okay,
And any is Attorney Shannon here?
She's not present.
Okay, all right. Okay, so then just Miss Dennehy and me and his staff, who is
Okay.
probably know the site. That's why. So I was brought in about early this year, and so I reviewed the documents. I did some review. So if you can see, let me show you. So we first we filed an RDA. We sent our report in and talked to Joyce. So we filed this RDA. Yesterday, Joyce and I walked the site. So in the document you will find is our inspection report dated July 25th, 2022, which also attached that the information we reviewed is a soil testing location plan by Schofield Brothers. And I think they are GTA or DGA right now. And then also a copy of conservation administrative approval from 2016 for doing those. And then a copy of subsurface sewage disposal system replacement plan, EGT, which is so part of the Schofield Brothers board, Schofield Brothers, and which is 2021. And then there's a copy of Conservation Commission administrative approval dated February 19th, 2021. And the same was avoided, I guess, due to some kind of wetland observation or something, so which I didn't involve. So this is basically historic documentation. And so I went back in to review this property. So this property has a history started 1869, is about 150 years ago, have this house erected. And so this is the locus I'm going to blow up with. So you can see there's an intermittent stream on the other side of this ridge. So there's no technically any observable natural water course or wetlands, the one I don't want to say there's no wetlands because sometimes confusing. So there was surrounding the property, there's no wetlands. And then this is the Prospect Street and this is a Coolidge. So from the, there's like about 3-4 feet drop from this property down to Prospect Street. And from Prospect Street further down, probably 100 feet close, there's no wetlands, absolutely no. And so there's a man dug 4-foot well, about 12 feet deep, and with the pump at the bottom. And with the there's a discharging black old pipe hose, like a 1.5 inch diameter, which I will show you photos. So from looking this, if we go looking, I want to show you a little bigger. So this is the Legion Field, this is the house, and this is a barn or garage. I want to get a little local site plan. Okay, here's the first soil testing plan, which if you can see, yeah, actually I have another version. I want to keep the report open. Let me just turn to another sheet. So this is the soil test plan. Originally, 2016 was fired. And if you look in here, it's Prospect Street. There's a driveway coming in. This is the existing house. So there's a pump house here, which hosts this 4-foot diameter duct well, about 12 foot deep. There's a pump in it, discharging the water, basically follow this to the whole backyard area. And in this area also, you can find the old wired and the stocking fence is like probably 6x6 cedar post, so which was some still remnants in, some was kind of corrected, put in this area storage. So when I go to the site, was in the spring, I do see a mushy ground. In this, first I would say, well, why is that? I'm looking around it. There's the whole backyard is pretty much only ground cover with some newly understory growth of. There's only one tree, which is I would call a tree. It's a sugar maple, about 6 inches, probably like a 6 to 10 years old sugar maple, and then the other ones, honeysuckle around here, and bittersweet, and the only wetland shrubs I observe is a European buckthorn mixed with the common buckthorn, and then the ground cover is with mixed sweet golden nut, Joe Pye weed, sensitive fern, and so it's cover pretty much most of the yard. The soil profile, regardless whether it's hydric or not, is typically have like a 12 to 15 inch plowed loam, so like farm soils. And the soils here was classified as Windsor, which is hydrologic class A. So what's that mean is the soils, based on their permeability, how quick the water can go through, was divided into 4 categories. So all most of the members know, but since we have 3 new members, so there's 4 categories: is A, hydrologic soil group A, B, C, D. So the hydrologic soil group A is the most permeable one. It's basically you rarely will have wetlands in it because it drains so well. And class B also, you will rarely have wetlands in it, except that there's some, landscape alteration or modification. And so C and yes.
I want to step back for a second with all of the detail you're getting into to basically start with the fact of what is the project that you want to do and what is the main issue. If I understand it correctly, and if I look at the RDA, just for the sake of everybody here, essentially this RDA is to redevelop a single family residence. And you want to finished construction of a septic system. That was stopped for some reason, and then you're going to, now you want to basically continue with that septic system. And so, and the question here is that you're arguing that from this plan that I see in front of here is that at the highest level, and where I see you going, is that you're trying to get a RDA determination about whether there are any wetlands on the site, and therefore whether there's any conditioning or a need for an NOI to do the septic work as well as a new house or redevelop the house, whatever you want to call it. And so it comes down to an issue of, I see it, of are there wetlands there or not? You've submitted a report that says, which I think you're arguing that there are no wetlands. You've done a site walk with our agent, and therefore maybe to cut to the chase a little bit on this. We, in the end, as a commission, rely on our agent's review of that wetland determination, whether there are wetlands there or not, or whether if there are wetlands, where they are. And maybe since you're arguing that there are no wetlands, I would maybe say it might be more expeditious here if we then just go to our agent who walked the site with you to get her opinion of whether there are wetlands there and to see whether there's any disagreement, and if there is, then how to just resolve that.
Yeah, thank you, Mike. Yeah, no, so Mr. Chairman, so just give me like probably like 1 minute to summarize. So what all you said
Okay,
is
it's 8:12, and I'll give you to 8:13 and even 8:14 if you need it. But go on.
okay. All right, so you summarized very well our goal of the RDA, and then so my report is basically I said it's no valid. So the reason is because there is a wetlands there, as I show in the vegetation, as I marked over here, roughly about 77 feet long, starting from the discharging point of the well to about more or less the southern end of the house. And it's about 20 feet wide, which presented mixed vegetation and some kind of hydric soil conditions. And in the springtime, so probably not in the growing season that much, do have water because this well was flowing. If further down, both I think the agent and I didn't find hydric soils, and we worked all the way. I did, and she did probably before. There's no wetlands, as I explained. So there's a piece of isolated wetlands on a mild slope in the hydrologic group A soils, which my conclusion is due to the well lacking of maintenance overflow for all these years, and caused the wetlands formation of this small, roughly about 15 to 1,600 square feet of isolated wetlands.
Shang, can I ask you a quick question about that? I mean, I've never heard of a well just flowing. Is it actually a spring that's flowing?
It's probably artesian well.
Okay.
Whatever it is, what's the distance from that wetland to the septic area that you want to propose?
So which is probably definitely more than 100 feet away, but the house is within like 10 feet, and the house has a basement like about 6 feet deep. There's no sump pump or nothing in it, and it's bone dry.
Okay, then I will, okay, so but there's two activities you're trying to deal with here. You're trying to deal with a new house as well as continuing your septic system work.
That's correct.
And we can possibly break that apart. If that might help in terms of your construction sequencing, but obviously you might want to know more about the whole property than just the septic at this point. So are you essentially agreeing that there is a wetland area as defined by your green border there?
Yes, roughly, yes. And it's the one I would invite the members go probably to the side, look at it. If we dig in deep, the soil's more, because there's such a less permeable, thick
So, right, I don't want to get down to that level of detail. That's where
Okay,
we can
all right.
still use our agent. So therefore, Sorry to cut you off, but I just want to get this. So I guess we, in terms of our permitting process, whether I'd like to hear from Joyce, whether she agrees that those are that is roughly the only wetlands on the site, and whether that is somewhat of the an approximate, whether we need, it's not flagged, I guess, at this point. But whether that is a roughly the scope of what might be there, whether you'd want to comment now, or whether Jacob, you want to ask a question before Jacob, or make a comment before Joyce comments.
I can add a question. What is, I see on the application, it's asking to confirm boundaries, and I wanted to know what else exists within 100 feet beyond the borders of the plot in question.
Okay, that's more to the applicant, I guess. Maybe let's let Joyce talk about the wetland issue, so, because we need to know where the wetlands are and what they are before we. Joyce, do you want to comment?
Sure. So I would say that Deshang has shown the isolated wetland in roughly the area that we reviewed it. That green line is I would say pretty close to what we saw out there. And it's an unfortunate situation that you know, it takes a long time to turn soils hydric, and you know, these soils in this area are clearly hydric. And I can't imagine that this existed prior to the house being built. But it's just, you know, the house has been abandoned for so long. This is a condition that it's now, this is what they have to deal with. So I agree with his assessment as far as how it came about and where it is sitting. No, it's not flagged yet. He's just given a kind of a rough indication of where it is, but it does start at that square well, and it did end somewhere near the end of the house. But it's not flagged yet or located.
Is it wet even now?
No,
Yeah, yeah.
bone dry right now.
Well, it's not bone dry right now. It's wetter than you would expect something to be in a drought.
Right, because we
But
just
it's
walked
not
through the woods
flowing.
and everything's bone dry.
Yeah, it's not flowing, but the vegetation is very healthy.
Okay, so there is a wetland there that we've agreed upon, that we're seem to have some consensus about. There's a buffer zone around that kind of wetland that extends out, and the question is whether there is, if the applicant, I'll jump into this and say, and I'll venture to say that if the applicant wants to do work that will probably be within the buffer zone, once this, even though this is not fully delineated, we can see that there's clearly existing buildings that they might want to be redeveloping there, or whether an applicant wants to do work outside of the wetland and the buffer zone around it, then we would need to have a plan as to what it is where they want to work. In this case here, since there is a wetland and a buffer zone associated with it, the question for the applicant is whether it looks like we can possibly permit under an RDA. It looks like, depending on the distance and the fact that if Joyce felt there was no other wetlands on the site and this one was close enough, and that I haven't checked the scale, that I see it's 1:20, but I don't know what this is. I'm trying to see to the extent that the septic system that they're working on that's proposed is outside of the 100-foot buffer zone, then I could see possibly permitting work on the septic system as being outside of the buffer zone under this RDA, under an RDA. But if there's some other activity that the applicant is looking to do that would be in a resource area or the buffer zone, Good, we will now get the distance. And the answer is,
200,
what?
280. Let me
That's
see.
hard to believe, given the scale. The
Wait,
scale down
wait,
there
wait,
is
let-
8. Oh, that's
let me
100
check.
feet is that scale, so there's something
Let me
wrong.
check the scale. I think
You've
if
got
it's
the
a
wrong
20, then it's 140.
You've got it doubled somehow, I think. Um,
Yeah, no, it's 1 inch equal 20. Let me modify that.
all right, I mean, my eyeball says it's a little over 100, but we're close.
140. It will be 140.
Okay, so it is doubled. Okay. Still looks a little long, but so the question to you and the applicant is that if any work is to be done on this site, that would be in the our jurisdiction, which is the wetland and the buffer zone, then depending on the extensiveness of it and where exactly, it could require an NOI, but and possibly it could be an RDA if it's possibly in some outer buffer. But generally, this would probably require a notice of intent, depending on where you're doing activity. If you're doing it in all in our jurisdiction. The septic system looks like it could be outside of our jurisdiction, except for the issues of I don't know whether, I guess it's far enough away that we can't even, whether there's any erosion control needed at the edge of the buffer zone. That might be one condition if we go ahead and condition the septic system work. But so I leave it to the applicant as to what they're want to do under this RDA, because we wouldn't approve any activity. There's no activity that we could approve that you're proposing, because nothing proposed. If you're proposing to redevelop that house site, given its proximity, then we would just call this a positive RDA and require a notice of intent.
Mr. Chairman, if I may request.
Actually, I
some-
want to see, before you go, I want to make sure that other members of the commission or Joyce have any comment on the kind of ideas that I was just putting forth. And then you can comment.
I agree with you, Michael.
What?
I agree with what you said.
Okay, fine. DeShang, you can now.
Yeah, I would invite the members go to the site and take a look and see if this is a very unusual kind of situation. As I pointed out, the house have been existed for over 150 years here with a basement, no water in it, and with so the well with the pump, everything in place. So it's just due to lacking of any maintenance of people's. You can see the whole yard of it. I should show you some photos I took for the investigation. You will see there's literally not, well, this is like you can see there's really no tree. It's only that one little tree was here, which is like in a sugar maple, okay, which is even in a little bit lower condition. The surrounding area, if you go look at it, it's all sugar maple trees, upland trees. This is the only piece of wetland caused due to the abandonment. I don't know what I should say abandonment is, but because people still owns it, and the lacking of maintenance of the yard. There's not really tree in the whole backyard. You can see the backyard was once used for farming activity, anything. The soils are not the typical wetland soils per se, organic, almost like a thick organic matters. It was like in cloud loam, which is sandy.
But the problem is that I'm going to stop you when you get into that level. The problem is, for whatever reason, a wetland has developed there and has been created. I know the issue of it. I deal with it on my own property. A wetland was created due to a drainage issue. So a wetland was created under our obligation with the Wetlands Protection Act and the bylaw is that there is a wetland there and we have to deal with it accordingly. I'm not saying that you couldn't, that there, through the process of a notice of intent, that a project couldn't be done. Given there's already a site there, there's an existing house that has used a site there, so I think there's quite a bit of leeway for us to basically defend the Wetland Protection Act. And even if there was another, if the site is redeveloped and there's a little more distance from this wetland, right, it's that there's an ability to work on the site and still have a project that allows us to meet the Wetland Protection Act issues there. So it's just, I don't see how we could, I'm struggling with how we could just permit a project without either seeing that it's outside of our jurisdiction or doing an NOI and working out the fact that that a project can coexist nicely with the wetland that's there and protect it. And with some conditioning. And yes, obviously it'd be a lot easier for the developer or the owner to do a project where they didn't have to factor in any presence of wetlands. But I don't see how we can go forward and be doing our job in that way. And so I think we could work together to figure out a project that would work for everybody. Carol?
Yes, I agree. I'm
hold
not
on.
asking tonight to
Hold on.
making any
Yeah.
that decision, Mr. Chairman. I'm just trying to see if we can visit the site together. We can understand and assess the site better, rather than seeing is more believing than I telling you, or even Joyce telling you. When you're looking at, then we can say, how can we fit into this? If this wetland itself is isolated, it's less than 5,000 square feet, much less. So therefore, they are not under the Wetlands Protection Act per se, but it's under the Sherborn Wetlands Protection Bylaw. That's why. So I'd like to see if we can get in there to, as you suggested, we can go two steps. One is to let the septic system construction go forward, but at the same time, if we can get some input a little bit better based on the site, you would see, and coming up some more creative solutions fitting into the bylaws jurisdiction. We're definitely not trying to violate any laws. So if we can take in that approach, I feel it will be more probably productive rather than we just argue at the meeting and the Zoom. So we can be at the site together, maybe not maybe Joyce, me, and the members. We're taking a really good in-depth look at it and see what is the best way for the protection of our really important resources, and also to consider the owner's right, and in the both historic way and in the future looking forward way, how can we making this things a better project down the road? That's all.
Deshang, I don't see how us going to the site again is going to change the fact that this is a wetland, and like we have to go about this project a different way. There would certainly be a site visit, for certain. If this is a NOI, there will certainly be a site visit, and I'm sure we could figure something out. But just, this is not going to get resolved tonight. It's a wetland and we need to approach it a different way. And like Michael said, there's things that you can work on, if you can figure out what's outside of the jurisdiction, you guys have options with that. But it's a wetland now and we have to deal with it, unfortunately. And going out and me looking at it and seeing Joyce take the soil samples again and say, yes, this is a wetland. What am I gonna gain by that? Like, you guys have to decide what you want to do first.
Well, I think, right. We
Can I
give
make
it-
a- can I
Yeah,
make
go
a
Carol,
comment?
go Carol, and then.
Yeah, I guess I get a little, uncomfortable when we're talking about all these possible scenarios when, it seems like the bottom line is that the wetland should be delineated and then, they can submit or resubmit regarding the septic system. That's a big project. So we have to know that it's outside of the wetland, outside of jurisdiction, if that's going to go forward. And I was wondering if it would be better for them to do an ANRAD just to delineate the wetland and get that done.
That's
Joyce,
too
any thoughts
costly.
on that?
That's not practical for a small scope like this. It's
Okay.
expensive.
For the small
Um,
scope, it wouldn't be necessary for them to do that.
Okay,
Yeah.
okay. Yeah, I mean, I certainly agree with what Courtney said and what Michael said. It's a wetland. It should be, if we're not going to delineate it, at least if you're going to do any activity, it has to be under an NOI if it's within jurisdiction.
So coming back to, did I hear that you would like to break this up into 2 steps in terms of modifying the RDA to just include work being done on the septic system?
There is a septic design for the project that shows a new house, and if Shane could scroll down and show that. There is a septic design that shows the new house in the area of the existing dwelling and expanding upon that a little bit. That's page 17, I think, Shane. But the issue with separating it is the same problem we had with the one at Zero Hunting, is that the septic is outside, but the components are inside the 100-foot buffer zone. So, and it really needs to be, I mean, they're not just looking to put the septic system in, they want to redevelop the property.
Yeah,
They
I see
wanna
what you
build
mean.
their house.
That's a big difference. Okay.
So, I think, and I'm not speaking for the commission, I just think, I'm just listening to everybody and just saying, I think it's, people on the commission understand that, this is a unusual situation and it's unfortunate. And given that, I'm sure there's ways to work with you to come up with something that works for you and works for the commission. That would still, get you to, doing what you want to do. You've got a fairly large property here, so.
Such as like we can replicate this in the far corner somewhere. So because this is really, it's existing already disturbed. There's not really trees there. So I mean,
Replicating it, like you pointed out, isn't really practical because it's being fed from where it sits right now. So replicating it somewhere may not be practical, but you've got some flexibility, maybe pulling it forward further, maybe, just exploring your options. But that's just what I've been hearing from both sides here. That's all.
Right. I mean, if this was, it gets hard to, like, if you were coming forth with this proposal, we'd suggest an NOI for this, let's say, if you were going to do this. But right, I agree, a good point made that the septic that I was looking at, more than 100 feet, is only the field itself. It's not the whole septic system. So clearly, significant portion. So I guess the breaking it up part doesn't make much sense unless it was just limited to work on the septic field itself. But that might seem a little, we're trying to avoid breaking up projects like that. But I guess if I see this thing here, I didn't scroll forward and see this. So my mistake.
If I may suggest, like, one to go, so follow what Joyce just suggested. So we have existing house, have a setback from this wetland. If we can, which is existing condition, so if we can move this setback further away from it, a little bit moving forward, so to reduce the impact from the existing house to impact the wetlands. But we definitely don't have that much room to move outside of the buffer zone. Even it will be probably very difficult to move out to the 50, given the existing condition, the house is there, and there's lots of debris. That's why I feel if the commission members can go take a look and get us some kind of consensus, they can agree to, what may coming up some kind of guidance principle for the owner and the design team to move forward. That will be very productive or very helpful to us. That's probably making that.
Shane, the house is going to be demolished, right? So you could locate the house someplace else.
I know, but they have existing house. They have the right to rehab it, just keeping as it is, because that's there for 150 years. So I'm not understanding, because are they rehabbing the existing house, you're saying, or is no?
it?
I'd say they could, because that's their people's right. We were trying to keep, if you look at, they keeping the same distance setback from, if this is considered the wetlands. Right now, I'm not even arguing that, just assuming it is. So what is the option? I mean, we are looking at here practical. So that's why I feel if you go look at the site, you will get a better, and then so to get a more direct assessment, say how to move forward. You already have a plan which was originally approved for moving forward, and just the recent 2021 was avoided this permit, administrative permit is almost moving forward. That's why this septic system is almost finished. If you're looking,
wasn't the previous one, wasn't it approved just for the septic system?
Yeah, that's assuming the house is allowed to.
Let's not go back over the history.
Yeah, so that seems irrelevant to me.
The history, we're dealing with this afresh, and I see what you mean. In terms of a site visit, you're dealing with the issue of what essentially could be some sort of mitigation.
Right.
And setup of whether, for example, whether the house could be, there'd be some mitigation for the fact that maybe some of the work close to that wetland is that there's the distance from the wetland, as well as some of the altered buffer zone around on the left and right of that buffers of that wetland are protected.
Right.
Could create a much better protected little isolated wetland. So that I could see that there would be that the idea of the site visit is to do that, is to basically see that we feel like it looks like, given that there's a lot of altered buffer zone around there, that protecting some of the buffer zone to the left or the right and getting a little greater distance separation from the actual building, right, that there's a possibility of something that, even though the commission struggles with those kind of trade-offs and people have different views on the commission, and that, speaking for myself, I could see that there's a project there that could do better protect that existing wetland and still allow some other disturbance in the buffer zone.
But we're not gonna do that
Right.
through this
I know,
RDA.
right, we're not doing that. We're gonna do, the question is whether you have to file it, where I was going to is that an RDA is, I think we would all agree that an NOI is needed. And for the whole project, and that you have to put forth something, whether you want to do an NOI based on this plan here and some mitigation for what's happening in the buffer zone and whatever else. And then that would be a starting point for us to see what we could work out. Obviously, it becomes very tricky. You're asking for more guidance up front than we comfortably give without a project being on the table in the form of an NOI. So because we get into trouble if you start saying this, that, and the other could work. And then in the NOI process, we can't be held to those kind of things. But I would say that a reasonable way forward is to come forth with an NOI with a plan and some sort of appropriate protection for the wetland there, and showing that it's whether the wetland better protected as well as an improvement or some mitigation in terms of buffer zone protections and things like that. That I would say would be from my point of view, a fruitful activity for you to move forward. And that I'm not sure how much more we can say tonight versus the fact that we would say it's that for what you want to propose, that we would give it a positive RDA, so you'd have to file an NOI.
Right.
I still like to divide into two parts. I do understand what this says. There's some components because of the house. The leaching field itself is totally outside of it. It's really 65% down, but it's exposed to the air, and another winter come. And this, I feel it should, given an active or allow that leaching field be completed and backfield protected. Otherwise, we don't know how long this can drag in. So the house itself can be righted out, say not to permitted on this RDA. So that's also part of the reason. If you see that all the pipes is exposed, and I mean, we should. That's very reasonable. It was in the middle of it. The construction was get stopped.
Okay,
So
then let me ask the other commissioners whether,
look at that. The pipe is exposed. I mean, it's almost.
I'll ask Joyce
everything's-
whether you think, whether basically what you think of the idea of whether we, even though we're liking not to break up things, but given,
So I think they're gonna have to go back through the Board of Health because this has been open for years. It's not just been this year. And I don't recall who said that to me, but you know, that this wouldn't be a simple just closing it up. I think they have to go back through them, and then we have the same problem with the Board of Health where they want to see the tank in the house. And the, you
Yeah.
know, and
right,
it's-
okay.
Right.
No, that's the part we would deal with Board of Health, but without the commission's agreement on this, we cannot even go back to them. That's what I talked to Mark on this. So we have to get, it's like in, catch 22. I agree with it. So, but that's the way we have to deal
And you're
with
gonna
it.
have to do an NOI for the whole project, because the Board of Health is not gonna, right, they're not gonna approve just a field, I think. Versus they're gonna want to have approval for the whole project, for the whole set.
Yeah.
The Board of Health is gonna do it, so that I think that, whereas maybe the timing is not good for whatever's going, it's obviously been abandoned for a while. But I think that, given right what the Board of Health is gonna do, I mean, it's only a matter of whether do we as a commission, before I'll let you go after this, Carol, of say that we can do whether, I guess we don't want to be in the business of breaking up projects and giving an RDA for just a septic field. An RDA for individual parts, because it doesn't work well for us. And that we would like to see permitting applications for the entire project. And whether that's what the rest of the commission feels. Even though I was going down the road of, do we end up with permitting individual parts? But even when we started doing wells without other things, it gets difficult to look at the overall. I don't know. I'll let you speak, Carol.
Well, I would just support what you just said, and when we've been trained by MACC, that's their guidance. You have to have the complete project. So I don't think it's a good idea, to separate the septic, which also, by the way, I mean, I just had my septic system replaced. It has all sorts of constraints that then forces the house to be in a certain configuration, and then you'll be coming back to us, and you could increase the expense of the entire project if we ask for changes. So I think there's a reason that the state and all guidance that we've gotten is that we should be looking at a complete project. That's what we need to evaluate.
Well, we can take in the proposed house out. So the existing house is entitled to have an upgrade system for itself.
But to
So-
Shang, the Board of Health, did you specifically ask them if you can just get this field fixed because without doing the tank or any of the other work? Because Because I highly doubt that they're gonna let you do that.
Well, if it's existing upgrade, so they will let us to do it. It's just, so which part we do first? That's in the Sherborn, the Board of Health practices, they need conservation's approval to.
Yes,
for
just
cer-
saying,
what-
I
which
know
part-
that. Please don't explain it again. We're all aware, but
The
I
question
mean,
is,
this
But we
is an
suspect the Board
abandoned
of Health
house,
what to do.
and that's a half abandoned septic system. I think you're just wasting your time if you just try to go to them for just that septic field. I don't think you're better off just going to the drawing board, coming up with the NOI and getting this thing rolling.
It's a good solution. I just feel no matter what, that leaching field is going to be used. So because it's a.
yeah, but it's just a field, and you have all the other infrastructure that has to get permitted too, and they're gonna want to see that from us as well. I don't think they're in the habit of permitting parts of systems. They permit an entire system. They're not gonna give you approval for part of a system. And then once you give them the whole system, then it's gonna fall in our jurisdiction and they're gonna come back to us. So that I think you're gonna, as Courtney just said, that it's gonna create some additional delays as opposed to just embarking on a notice of intent and let's get the whole project sorted out.
Okay, so I know it may not fly with the commission. So in order to do this NOI, we need to get that. So this is really a tiny, small wetlands. Can we use this RDA to get at least the wetland line agreed, and then we can move forward for.
No,
for
we
the-
don't, we do not approve wetland lines under RDAs.
So I know that's not in the law say you can't do that. That's
That's what we,
sometimes I don't see any places with written.
yes, but
in your
RDAs are
bylaw.
they're not the place to do approve wetland lines. So that's what we've been doing for quite a while. And so, you can, you've already gotten a lot of guidance about that anyway under this RDA as to where the wetland line is. It's not a lot of wetlands, even though we thought it, I mean, even given the formula, it's probably not, if you're so concerned about the wetland, you could do an ANRAD. It's not a lot of linear feet since the pricing is based on that. So you could do a small ANRAD if you're particularly concerned about that ahead of time. Because it's whatever, the few dollars per linear foot. And so you could pursue the ANRAD route. And it wouldn't be as burdensome as some other when it's a much larger set of wetlands. So I think that's the advice I give you in terms of saving. I mean, maybe, I'm not sure we can do much more tonight other than to say that I would move that this is move that this is a positive. That this, I mean, I don't know if we want to be given the, I mean, we've already spent a bit of time on all of this and whatever else, whether we just, even the fee, whether the fee could be moved forward, whether we care, but basically I would move that it's a positive determination. Unless you want to withdraw the RDA. I don't know what we do for,
Well, I mean, we just
Yeah.
just did it, right?
yeah. Right, I have to go get my, I lost my little cheat sheet here that I didn't bring here.
We'll probably move to a NOI under just the bylaw only because there's no wetlands protection at wetlands. So we found here. So in that case, that's the only thing I can think of. So because if we go another round of AMRAD, then it's a delay. You know, you have to go through all this hearing process. 2 weeks of waiting and then hearing, closing, or at this you're putting like in another couple months delay.
Right, so we come back to the recommendation, which you guys need to you need to discuss that with the owners and make sure that's the way you want to go, but that's the recommendation, is just do the NOI and get going with the permitting.
It doesn't have to take that long. I mean, you don't have to exaggerate the time it takes. I'm
Yeah,
looking for my there. I mean, this is, doesn't necessarily have to be a complicated project to work out. But obviously, it's a somewhat unique setting. I'm trying to think, do you have I don't have the DOA in front of me. Joyce, do you have one there? For some reason, I normally have that. But I was going to move that. We call this a positive. There's some number. I'm not sure what you're muted, Joyce.
One moment.
I'm looking myself while she's finding it.
we'll just see who finds it first.
Yeah, I can't believe.
It's +3, I think. Is that what you're asking, what the determination is?
That is what he's asking.
Yeah, +3, it looks like. This is
The work
WPF 2, I think.
Yeah, the work described on reference plans and documents is within areas subject to protection, therefore requires the filing of a notice of intent.
Thank
Okay.
you, guys.
I move that that this is a +3 RDA.
Second.
Well,
Uh,
take that one.
any discussion? Okay, roll call vote. Michael, I. Carol,
Aye.
Courtney,
Bye.
Jacob,
Aye.
Matt. I haven't seen.
Aye, sorry, aye.
Okay, fine. Okay, so hopefully you'll work it out with the applicant and we'll see what we can work out if you proceed with the project.
All right, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Okay. Moving on, and could stop sharing the screen, whoever is sharing.
Yeah, I'm going to get out of it.
I don't know, I guess as host, should I be able to stop people from sharing?
Yeah, I just did it.
Oh, yeah, what'd you do it under?
It's right up at the top. You can, there was.
Oh, I
some
can stop
things there.
sharing. Okay, fine.
Yeah,
I'll learn how to do that next time. Okay. Let us go back. Let's see, going back to the agenda, we're still, the only thing left is to do a little bit more work on the a few more issues. As I heard that huff from somebody. I won't
it's
comment
my
about who it
yawn.
was.
blame it on the COVID.
Okay, fine.
I yawned.
Let's put a little more time into the tree policy to help us move this thing forward. So we're gonna have a term. We're only dealing with basically dead or dying trees or trees that are have that physical defect, even if they're alive, that could cause a problem there. I'm looking through these. Did we want to have any issues whether this is, I can't tell if we've discussed it before, whether this is in the inner buffer zone, the no alteration zone, or the outer buffer zone? We've generally made a big distinction between whether how we permit between the 50-foot no alteration, and I guess in this case, you have trees that are dying and falling and they're that close to these houses and it's in the inner buffer zone.
I think we would condition them But I think we would still permit them.
It's under this policy versus making
I
making
don't
back
think-
under an RDA.
I don't
Oh,
think
okay.
we could do anything different than whatever we lay out in the policy for inner versus outer, because it's the same deal. If there's a dead tree, they try to leave a snag, and we decide whether or not, we don't make people do that in the lawn necessarily. I don't know. That's another
Well,
question.
we could differentiate what we
Right.
have. I just want to make sure
But
that we're including the no alteration zone in this policy.
we need to, because this town is like, houses are like practically in wetlands, and people get dead trees dangling over their houses. So,
Uh,
and we need to get this because the ash borer is here.
And there's still lots of dead oaks from the prior infestations.
Right. So it might be different procedures in the sense of whether we require a snag. The question is, would we require anything differently, like a snag or something else, or it's just going to be the same in both places?
So in typically what we say is if it's outside the lawn, no matter where it is, we leave a snag.
Yeah.
But if it's in the lawn, we usually let them cut it down.
Yeah.
Okay. Can cut to the ground. We were making a distinction before about whether it was in terms of whether you could have stump removal.
Wait, Michael, is that what we want? If outside the lawn, I thought we
No,
wanted.
I put it the wrong way. Okay,
Yeah, you're just backwards.
yeah. It's hard to think and type and look at the same. And
Oh, believe me, I
even
know.
seem intelligent. I'm trying to go back to some notes we had about whether this whole idea of stump removal.
So how do you feel about no stump removal, but if they request to grind it?
Yes, I think that's what we've done in the past, because the stump removal is incredibly disruptive, but grinding it just below grade or whatever they do is not so bad.
And do we care whether and is that different whether it's in lawn landscape versus not?
Well,
Well-
outside the lawn, be a
Yeah.
snag.
Exactly.
What's that?
Outside the lawn, it would be a snag.
Yes. So it's just
Okay.
as they can cut it to the ground, or if they ask us, we can let them grind it.
Which is
I see.
basically cutting it to the ground. What's the difference between cutting to the ground and grinding to the ground? It's the
No,
same-
they grind it below grade and like stick some dirt on top of it or something. You know what I mean?
Courtney, your proposal is not letting them say pull the stump out.
Yes.
Pull the roots out. Okay.
Yes.
And if they
I'm
wanna
pretty
pull the
sure that's
stump-
what Joyce just said. I'm just
Yeah.
repeating it.
But if they want to pull the stump,
No, so they can't pull the stump.
They can't pull the stump.
I'm saying if they want to pull the stump, they can try an RDA.
Oh,
Okay.
sure.
Yeah,
But the policy would just say you cannot pull the stump.
Right, exactly.
There's
But we're giving-
there's always
We
the
want
outer.
to make it clear that this policy is not the last step. If they want to pursue things further that they don't like in this policy, they're always welcome to file an RDA.
Well, I wouldn't put that specifically for
Right.
pulling the stump.
I would-
because You're
It's a
implying
demolition.
that, I would just say if it's not covered in the policy, you need an RDA or whatever, because I don't want to make this seem like, oh, but if you really want to pull it, then just try us with an RDA. It kind of implies that there's a path to pull the stumps, and I think that there would have to be exceptional circumstances for that. So I would not mention it in any specific section.
Accept the general point of that. If they
Exactly.
don't like whatever the outcome is here, they could always file an RDA.
Yes.
And you know, when you grind to below grade, you can even cover it with soil. I mean, it really solves most problems.
Yeah.
Okay, so we'll just make it, I mean, we have to make it a general point because they always have the ability to go to an RDA. Okay. So I think we've got this thing here around.
I think there are a bunch of other topics around snags, but why don't we defer those till later?
Okay, I'm just working down this list here.
Okay.
This thing here, we don't need because we've discussed it. We'll figure out what term to use, so we sort of went over this.
Yeah. I guess I do have a question, I guess, for Joyce or for those of us who have more experience here. Do we have cases where there are hazardous trees that are in resource areas that we need to provide some guidance on?
So that has happened because sometimes the wetlands come right up to the edge of the lawn.
Yeah.
Right.
And if it's dangerous, what we've said is leave a snag. And if it's dead and it's pointed in the direction of the house, but not, we go further to say all those other steps that we take. No debris in the wetlands.
We're not going to have it, but just to get to your point, Jacob, we're not going to let activity in a resource area without a more formal permitting policy because then you're in the resource area itself. And that makes it because this policy sort of sits outside of the standard permitting process. So I guess the answer is not in resource area.
Not in resource. Okay. Can we jump to the riverfront question yet? Because that confuses me around whether that's a resource area versus.
It is a resource area.
Oh, that does make it trickier. If we're not doing it in a resource area.
Right.
Not in a resource area except outer. Except
specify
outer riparian.
We could specify only in buffer zones or.
No, the riverfront area is its own resource area.
But it is handled a little different. It doesn't have a buffer zone.
It's a weird thing.
Do we want to let this policy go in the outer riparian area, which is the 100 to 200, if unaltered? Or I guess it's the same as above.
Are there few enough in town that we should not try and solve that problem with this policy?
I agree.
So we don't want to deal with it. So we're not going to include it.
The idea is to make this somewhat easier.
So the
But it doesn't have to cover everything.
Wait, Joyce, what are you agreeing with?
I would say we shouldn't distinguish. I think we should. There's so few people that are going to be taking down dead trees. I think if you exclude the riparian area and say nothing can be done within the riparian area, then that's going to be a problem, particularly the inner riparian area.
Yeah.
The inner riparian area, that's like.
Like what if you're,
that's a
if we're
resource.
still talking lawn and things dangerous to house and home and life, the more restrictions you put on it, the less helpful this is going to be.
Yeah. I mean, that's kind of my argument for any resource area. It's just like, I mean, we have a lot of houses that are like practically in a wetland. I mean, look at the last thing we just looked at. I think if something is dead and it's leaning towards someone's house, and it's dead, so it's not really offering shading. And if we're asking them to leave a snag as tall as we can, that's just not going to fall on their house. Then, I mean, I'm not sure what change is happening to the wetlands that we would need to do a permit for. Or am I out of control here?
Well, I guess I'm still, so you're arguing that this could apply to the, I think once we get into the resource area, I mean, the riverfront's a little different. I'd be willing to, without saying why or whatever, I'd be willing to let this policy work for the outer riparian area of 100 to 200. And I'd like to see how many cases we really have where the inner riparian area turns out to be a problem versus making it go to an RDA. So I would, I feel like sort of trying to do permitting in a resource area through a policy is just, I don't feel comfortable doing that, even though obviously, but I don't feel comfortable letting a policy be a means of permitting work in a resource area, or at least the inner riparian area of the riverfront. Just
So
as
what
a-
would you gain if you asked them to file an RDA for a dangerous tree in the riparian zone? I'm just wondering what.
We would have, we could condition it. And we'd have more control over the conditions, even though even there we have problems.
So
with
this
having
is still a permit. You're still creating a permit with this, and it's got conditions attached to it.
No, this is not a permit. I don't think this policy is a permit. It's just a, so, I mean, part of it is,
I mean, the policy, like they're gonna have to fill out a form and it's basically going to be a type of permit. And it's just, it's very specific. And if they don't meet the conditions in this policy, they can't get approved this way. And it's, and we can have all the things that we would normally say, like, you know, they need to like crane it out. There's no machinery in the resource area, that kind of thing.
the question is whether that's the agent is going to be doing in this policy. Are we going to be having a whole range of those conditions? And that we just enumerate, and the agent is going to go on site and say, these are, whether it's a checklist, and say, okay, fine, you're gonna have to make sure it's a crane, make sure you do it this thing, make sure you access it from the driveway, altered area. So
think
we're
that's
gonna
what we
come up
want.
with a checklist of things that the agent would then check off, give the approval. If they don't follow this, then our recourse, as with an RDA, is a violation.
Exactly. We could do enforcement. I mean, I think that's what the agents have been asking for a while. It
Correct.
just,
You can
that's
ask-
exactly what they want.
I know it's what they want. It's not what I just want to feel comfortable that would permitting activity in a resource area. I mean, I have no problem with the whole buffer zone under this. I'm just struggling a little bit with the idea. Okay, but not to finalize it now, but essentially what I hear you, Courtney, saying is that you would let this policy hold for everything, resource area and buffer zone.
Yeah.
Because it has to be threatening something that we would eventually permit anyway.
And it has to fall under that kind of dead, dying, or physical defect.
So it wouldn't be.
Not a live tree.
It wouldn't be a dead tree in the resource area that if it fell would fall in the resource area. That wouldn't be allowed.
That
They
would-
can't call up and say, I've got 3 dead trees in my wetlands, I want to take them down. That wouldn't be.
Right.
Right, you would have to make, the agent would have to make a decision that which way is the tree gonna fall.
Or just, is it even close enough and tall enough?
Right.
Because we've had people that were like, see that dead tree out there?
No,
I
you don't have
wanna
to
take
repeat
it
that.
down.
It's all right, you don't have to overdo the hypothetical. Carol, where are you on this?
I mean, I guess I basically think that I like to be a little bit more protective. Overall, I think the policy should go toward the idea that if it's in the resource area and it's a threatening tree, it should be reduced to a snag, not be taken down.
No, yeah, the conditioning, we don't have to talk about the conditions. I just want to get whether this thing,
Whether I
with
think
conditions.
it should cover hazard trees in the resource area itself.
Yes, that's what I want to get at. I just want to get a yes or no on, or maybe on that. And then we can figure out how to qualify. We can do all the qualifications we want. If we agree on that, it's going to be in a resource area too.
Well, so if we say no, that it doesn't qualify, then if somebody has a hazard tree that's actually in a wetland, they have to go through the RDA process?
And Joyce's comment is, what do you gain there? And I'm struggling. I don't have the answer for it. And I'll think about this afterwards. I just want to get other people's opinions because I could wrestle with this with Jacob and coming up with a draft. So I have the leeway to think a little more and see how we write this up together. But I just want to get input from others.
I will stay quiet for a minute.
I guess the main thing is that if the RDA process allows us to say, you know what, in this case, we think there should be mitigation or something like that, then maybe the RDA process is better. I don't know. I'm actually kind of torn. I'm having trouble deciding which way.
Well, we can write it up that way and we could see what we think. And we could write up a few comments about how because right, one of the issues is would we have different mitigation in different parts. But we could try writing it up since I guess Courtney likes it that way. I'm sort of a little on the fence. You're a little on the fence. I don't know, Matthew, do you have an opinion?
The only thing I would comment on is that we don't want to put people at odds with their homeowners policies. And most homeowners policies have exclusions for losses resulting from known dead or damaged or defective or hazardous trees. So when someone gains knowledge of a dead, dying, or hazardous tree, it's incumbent upon them to remove it, or else any subsequent loss could be excluded from their policy. So I'm not disagreeing with anything you guys are saying. All I'm saying is that we might want to be mindful of that going forward.
Yeah, true.
But it could still be handled under either process, right?
Right. Obviously, we can deal with it either way, and we would allow it to happen. It's only a matter of, does an RDA give us any more protections than just a more comprehensive enough policy with a checklist of things that would tantamount to the conditioning of it under an RDA. And so I'm leaning, I could be swayed to going the more expanded into the resource area if it's threatening, as long as we have a good checklist.
The case for excluding it would be if we're uncertain about what the conditions would be and want to see a few examples that would come through an RDA and say, look at them in detail and say, these are what the conditions should be, and then plan on going and revising policy sometime in the future.
Yeah, or we could just think through, we could do the mind exercise of thinking it through, and we could also, and the agent, well, let's put it this way, whichever way we go, we'll either hear about it if we make it too limited, or we'll be looking at the approvals that the agent hands out, and the agent can describe some of the cases that were on the fringe in a resource area and talk about which way the decision went and why, and we could see whether we want to amend the policy. So, I mean, we could possibly start more extensively and then recognize that after 6 months or more, let's review all the permits that were given that were involved trees in the resource area. And we can then learn by doing. And we could either make it more, we could change the policy to make it more constrained if a majority of us feels like, wow, that got permitted, I would have done it differently.
Well, Michael, I thought in the Lincoln policy, so we haven't talked about this and maybe we don't have time tonight, but in the Lincoln policy, they did talk about replacement trees, right? And I thought that they had, maybe they were stricter about replacement trees if it was actually in the resource area.
Well, that's an issue again, I'm going to say to you that once we decide we're doing in the resource area, then we can come up with all those kind of, I'm just trying to get at that first level without
I see.
down the road.
Well, I mean, to me, that would matter. Like if we were actually going to automatically, then to me, that would make it more palatable.
Fine, then that's where we're going to go to. That's going to be the next level, is that if a tree's in a resource area, if a tree's maybe in a resource area, that's the outer riparian, we can then have or it's just in the inner buffer or the outer buffer. We already have distinctions, whether it's an inner or outer buffer, and whether it's altered or not altered.
Right.
And so we just need to come up with what are the conditionings that would be imposed depending on, and the mitigation, as you say, will vary based on where it is. And the mitigation will also have to vary based on the site issues, like whether the tree contributed to the shading or didn't contribute to shading. That would affect the mitigation. We'll have that kind of factor in there, at least the way I have it in my list, that there'll be a number of factors that could shape what the mitigation would be. And let's see, moving forward a little. So, okay, so in the end, it looks like maybe we're starting with in resource areas as well, since it's threatening. And yes, my homeowner's insurance is under review right now, and I will let us all know what the inspector says when they see the fact that my house is surrounded by all sorts of trees and wetlands and whatever else. So I will have a firsthand experience with that issue. Let's see. Conditions and mitigation based on whether resource area, maybe type, whether riverfront, I'll make that a little different. Riverfront inner versus outer, MAZ, and outer buffer. Okay, going on to other points in this list here that you had, Jacob. Let's see.
I was trying, I don't know if we need to decide this now, but I spent a while trying to figure out whether we needed to be prescriptive around saying something like, when you create a snag, keep it as tall as possible while mitigating the hazard. Or if that will be obvious and we can just ask, how tall are you planning on leaving the snag, and let the agent say that seems reasonable or not. The little kind of reading I did for sort of what's useful for snags seemed to be that all different, that you kind of want a variety of heights if you're going to have lots of them around. But I don't know.
Oh, really? The
We
height
can
there?
assume that. But that was writing about the Pacific Northwest, and I haven't found anything that said whether that would apply here.
Jacob, I
feel
liked what you said at first about, as high as reasonably possible, but mitigating the hazard. I mean, that sounds reasonable. Sorry, Carol, what were you gonna say?
No, sorry about that. I have to say the snag thing started to become a little bit of a pet peeve in my own mind, because it feels to me like something that's 5 feet tall is not really a snag, and it's not a particularly useful habitat. So I think it would be great if we gave some guidance. I actually was just looking, the government says the wildlife trees, large snags more than 12 inches in diameter and 15 feet tall, offer hunting perches. Right. For hawks, eagles, and owls. And to me, yeah, like I think at one point we said a snag should be a minimum of 20 feet. So to me, a snag is a minimum of 15 feet. That's not very high. And if it's a big tree, that's a pretty stable snag. I had a white ash snag that was well over 20 feet that stood solid as a rock for at least 10 years. And I only took it down because I was having the septic system replaced right under it. And they said, we'll do it now. So.
Okay, so let's, right. Do we pick so whether we have a scientific basis for picking a minimum, whether it's 20 feet or something, and then unless it's still a hazard.
Yeah, and I don't know how we define that. I guess if there's a snag that's right over, if very close to something in particular, it might be shorter, right?
Right, I guess we can encourage them to make it as high as possible and still mitigate and say that we want at least a 20-foot minimum unless still a hazard. Could have something like that.
Right.
And obviously the number could be, right, obviously there's a tree that can hit something. So obviously it has to be close enough to something there, although I guess 100-foot tree could still come down quite far. I'm just trying to think of whether the minimum should be even larger than this.
I mean, there's certainly there are uses like bats and the raptors that Carol was mentioning. They want 40-foot high snags.
I would think that we could have a higher, because as long as it's until it's still a hazard, then somebody would calculate, okay, you do a rough calculation of, okay, the tree is 35 feet from the house. Therefore, it's a 35-foot height.
Yep.
So that we just have a minimum of, we could start with 40. I mean, I don't know if we want to write it that as high as possible and still mitigate the hazard. And then each one is a separate calculation of how far is the tree away.
I feel like this is an area where we want to give the agent some latitude, because if it's, for example, damaged by storms and it's not 40 feet tall anymore, or I can imagine all sorts of where are the branches that make it specifying a minimum like this not make sense.
You took the words out of my mouth.
Still be a hazard. That would still be the hazard part.
Yeah.
If a 40-foot tree has branches at 35 that could still hit something, then okay, recognize that either they can limit or they just cut it down to 35 feet.
Well, also the arborist would just come in and lop off all the branches, right? And then that's what they did with my tree, and then they leave the snag.
Okay, well, you're right. So we'll start with the 40 and see how it works. Or if we find some other number for, I mean, if it was, at least that way it has some science, wildlife-based rationale.
I do remember seeing a table of here are all the users of snags and the heights they liked. So I could probably find that again.
Fine, you could find it again and we can put it in our information frequently thing there so that people can see why it would be nice to have that. Because it's always nice to let people understand why it is we're doing something. So, and a picture's worth a million words. So I like that. Okay. Okay, we talked about that. Riverfront. I think, well, we'll review the scope here, this issue down here. Because whatever falls outside the purview of the policy, you'll have to come to the commission or have to get some other permit. The lawn area we already discussed. Let's
So the
see.
mitigation topics next.
Yeah, we could talk a little bit about mitigation because that one we're gonna have to come back to. Because we had, I'm gonna go to where. Okay, here's a. Here's some beginning material, I guess, that started, because in our last policy, the Sherborn one, we had several live trees for each. I guess that's the question is, for a dead tree. I think we've gone through this. There's the snag. But is there any planting going on for a dead tree?
I would say no.
Yeah, I would say no.
Say no, but we might want to word it such that if you're removing a dead tree in your lawn, we encourage something but don't require it.
Yeah, but even then I don't even want to get into the lawn one because it's I mean, obviously if it's in it's in the unaltered buffer, stuff's going to regenerate anyway, or is already regenerating. Oh, so you think, I'm not sure I'd want to tell people what to put in their lawn.
Well, one thing I wonder, one thing that worries me about not requiring any mitigation for dead tree is, I mean, the wetland, we know that there's been a lot of these, like the gypsy moss and stuff like that, where in the course of a single season, a bunch of trees died. And so we know that that's not great for the wetlands when that happens. And that's where I'm thinking that it might make sense to ask for some mitigation. I don't know how we do it. I mean, it is kind of like an act of nature, but
Right.
so I know that's why in the past we've had some reluctance about it, but I feel like it would be good from a wetland perspective if there was something we could do with that. And I mean, when I look at something like the Lincoln policy, it seems like they're doing that, where they're basically saying, yeah, if it's a dead hazard tree, we still are going to ask for replacement trees, and probably because they're thinking more about the wetlands than about, should somebody have to take care of some, address something that Mother Nature did to the tree on their property, right?
So the Lincoln policy is sort of reversed in sense. They require that you plant a mitigation, but they explicitly say that if you're replacing something as dead, you can submit a request for a waiver because of that.
Oh, that's interesting. So they're basically trying to encourage people
Right.
to be willing to kind of step up and do it. But if they feel like it's onerous, they can say, hey, we really don't want to do it. I kind of like that, actually.
I kind of like that too, because it would also let you say, look at what's in the existing wetland and say, look, there's plenty of saplings that are going to spring up now that there's this gaping hole or this dead thing removed, and say, I don't think it's reasonable here, but maybe I'll do something somewhere else, or have something that's more appropriate for the site.
I like that. I like that because, like, when I look at my woods, well, I don't know, I don't have a wetlands, but things are always springing up all over the place. And that would be the argument I might make is, why should I plant something? There's a little oak seedling right here.
I would say that's kind of a leap. I think that's too much to ask of the homeowners, and it's dead, the homeowner didn't kill it, and trees die and they fall down and wetlands change, and that's a natural process as well. I mean, asking people to plant trees for dead trees as mitigation that's a man-made change to the wetlands. So I don't think we require any mitigation for.
Is this different if it's in a lawn or an altered wetland? Because there's not an expectation of something springing back or something filling in.
Well, I mean, nature's going to do something with it.
Well, no, you're
Not a lot,
differentiating. You're differentiating between where we're letting nature do its recourse versus in an altered area where there's not going to be. Right, I would probably like to think that, right, if a tree is. Right, if the tree is taken out in an area that's not being managed. And so that vegetation can come back on its own.
Or
maybe it won't.
Oh,
I don't think we should be that laissez-faire about it, because I think Lincoln actually has it right in this case.
Are we talking about in a resource area or just in the buffer zone? Or are you talking everywhere?
Well, just in general, that they're trying to basically say, you should be planting. I'm not splitting hairs on it.
Okay, because I like that, but I have some concerns about, because I guess this is, I have to keep remembering that this is a tree that's close to a house or a driveway.
Right.
Definitely. I don't like people working in the resource area, because I think that even doing planting and mitigation, it's more likely to cause more of a problem. I would actually want to encourage planting trees, but I would like to keep it outside of the resource area, because I just have these, images of work where people try to do stuff in a resource area that causes more damage than good. So
Right.
that I would like to keep any mitigation that we do outside of the resource area, even if it's cut a dead tree in a resource area. And I would see that that there's probably a buffer zone that could be improved with the tree. And at least an inner buffer. Because I partly think about even when people go to plant a tree in unaltered buffer zone, I worry about the damage that they create.
I think one tree wouldn't, but Michael, one thing I thought was smart about the Lincoln policy is it was the choice of like shrub or tree. And the reason I thought that was a good idea was, you know, if somebody had a dangerous tree in a place that's like hanging over their house and they're like, I just can't stand to plant another shade tree next to my house because God knows it'll happen again. They could plant shrubs. So then it's in the resource area, it's helping the resource area. But it's unlikely to become.
I have no problem with that. I like that idea. That's still within the idea of what mitigation they do. We're just at the level of what are we requiring some mitigation for certain things. For a dead tree, whether we're essentially, which is part of a natural process, even if it's human created by who knows, we've messed up the environment and you have spongy moths everywhere and whatever else. So it's hard to separate our indirect, but in terms of our indirect impacts versus natural impacts, whether we want to require something versus if it's our the dead tree is not the result of a direct human activity, that it's just nature and going on. So I guess I'm still for a dead tree. I guess you can differentiate between, I guess it's always dead. So they're basically presuming that any mitigation is basically doing an improvement.
Well, can I say something about this idea of fairness or not fairness or dead or not dead? I mean, when Rolf was talking to us, he made the point that in Cambridge, which is an urban environment, if you take down a tree, including a dead tree, you have to replace it. And I think it's like, I think that the point of it is like, I think commissions, when they're doing this, are saying, look, we want to bolster, strengthen nature. We recognize that if it's in our jurisdiction, we want to do everything we can to strengthen the wetlands. And we know all the science says that if we, the more you do that, the better it is. And if it's not extremely burdensome, and that's why I think the Lincoln policy is pretty good, because they're basically giving the homeowner the opportunity to say this is burdensome to me, but otherwise they're saying we want you to do this.
Yeah, but Cambridge, there's hardly any trees. Here, almost all of the area we're talking about is, if it's not already altered, if we're talking about buffer zone that's not altered, or resource area which is not altered, there's ongoing process. In Cambridge, somebody cuts down a tree, nothing's going to really come up on its own. Here, as you see in the woods around here, all the oaks are dying from the moth attack, but you could already see significant regrowth underneath it from all the other trees that are now getting sunlight. And in fact, in some places, it's not a pleasant sight to see all the bittersweet and I mean, some of the grapevines are nice, are okay, but I'm not quite sure. But in the end, we're working in an area where that's why that whole issue for me is whether it's that issue, or even what Jacob brought up, whether it's in unmanaged or managed area. Because in unmanaged areas, there's a lot going on naturally. Somebody's joining the meeting now. Oops, iPhone 5.
I guess, Michael, I would suggest, I agree with you that there's a bigger risk of people doing any kind of mitigation in the resource area. That worries me. But that to me, mitigation in the buffer is a good idea. That would be my,
I can't get behind asking people to do mitigation for a dead tree, whether in altered buffer or not altered buffer. You know, if people's dead trees fall down all the time and we don't, like, we've never asked for this before, so this would be a big change.
I
Like,
agree.
people have taken down dead trees via RDAs, and we've not asked for any mitigation other than the snag. I just I mean, that's an added expense, and I get what you're saying. I'm like, everybody should plant more trees, but I just think we have to be careful about requiring that or making it, you know, too much pressure on people to do it, because it's like, that's not the point of this policy.
Right. I wouldn't want people who are already having to deal with some problems to have to take the burden, because we'd like everybody to do better improvement of their wetlands. I see. I mean, I see what you're saying. I'm trying to think whether we'd even make an exception if they're taking down I mean, the only science logic around wetlands for me maybe at the moment is that if they have to take down a tree that's still provides some significant shading in an area.
And a dead tree definitely doesn't provide shading.
Well, we're allowing for structural defects and things like that in a tree that would be alive.
Sure.
So I'm only getting at the case of trees that are alive. That if they take down a live tree based on the idea that it's got a structural defect, I could see asking for mitigation in that case. But I think I'm leaning towards no mitigation. I guess I'm sort of being swayed to the. I mean, I wanted mitigation.
The only part of that leaves me queasy is if it's in a lawn or something like that, and if they remove it and don't put something else there, there's not going to be any shade that grows back.
Yeah,
But it's
there's not
already
much
a
shade
lawn.
anyway.
no,
There's
but
already-
if there was a tree in the lawn that was shading the wetlands, I think is that the point you're making?
But it's
Yes,
dead.
Yeah, but if it's a dead tree, it's not doing any shading.
right. It's not
That's
doing any good there now.
That's why I'm arguing a little that maybe we have something different for if it's if a partly, if at all live, like some parts of it, and has some shading values. That's basically, if it's alive at all, therefore it has shading values, but it might, and that shading, because it might be just so many other trees, there's enough shading, then mitigation. Whether it's shrub, tree, shrub. Okay, let's start with something where there's no mitigation for dead, and for alive, maybe we have something. And we could always be reliving this. This is not the final word here. I just want to get through something so that we could put all the words together. But yes, so it's clearly an issue that could be flagged. Like we could certainly flag. So we could see if anybody changes their mind or changes their side. So on the mitigation side there, and we could still keep some language in here about what other places have done, because we used to have a lot more mitigation. But I think that was for live trees. And then you get into the issues of where it's all planted or whatever. Okay, what other major themes do we want to hit here? Trying to go back in my other screen here to look at some of the other issues we had. Are there any limit to the number of trees that could be cut under this? If they're all dead, they're all dead.
In what I had here now, there was, I think Lincoln said 5 trees and didn't differentiate between living or dead. In what I wrote here, I put 4 live and any number of dead, but I don't have a strong
Okay.
reason for coming up with those values.
Right. No, I kind of. So there's no limit on the dead and there's some limit on the live because then maybe we're worrying about shading and other kind of stuff. Even though it's still a threatening tree.
Right, still a threatening tree, but if there's that many of them, we want to review and understand
Yeah.
why or what's going on.
Okay, anybody want to comment on that kind of bounding?
That sounds reasonable. Cause like I'm trying to imagine a situation where there's like a house surrounded by a fortress of dead tree. Like, I can't imagine a situation where it would get so out of control that there would be some kind of, environmental destruction from taking down so many dead trees. But
Oh, I can think of dead trees. Oh, I can think of cases where that has come up for live trees, like when they had the what was it in Worcester? The longhorn beetle, and they needed to sort of clear entire neighborhoods.
yeah, no, I'm just
So
thinking
we
of the
definitely
dead
want to review
trees.
those.
It seems fine to have no limit on the dead trees.
Okay, so we're all right there. Dead or dying. Let's see, I'm just looking at my old list of issues. Does anybody have any other bigger issues they want to bring up?
We
Okay.
haven't talked about whether we like the Lincoln approach in terms of number of replacements or anything like that. That's just basically straight copied.
I mean, the replacements if we have mitigation?
Yeah,
Basically,
when we have mitigation, sort of how
right
many.
now, we're only thinking of mitigation for a live tree.
Right.
I guess I would have this thing here.
And then there's a definition below about required sizes or something. But
Yeah, the required sizes, I think I wanted something bigger, like a 2-inch.
I kind of wanted to go to some nurseries and see if those are large enough to what's the biggest size you can move around in a wheelbarrow and not require machines.
I think it's somewhere the 2 to 3 range, but 1 inch is, I think, too small. And if we're gonna and even in the shrubs, which are down number 2, which I think is also the same as gallons, I think.
It seems to be the common sizes.
And I would like at least sort of more larger shrubs to start, but I guess sometimes some people argue they're harder to make sure they stake, but I think we have somewhere, whether I think they're larger, we require larger, we can go look at the Maple Street NOI order of conditions where we required certain sizes of trees and shrubs that we batted around. So we should look at 0 Maple Street order of conditions to get some sizes there. Okay. So for a live tree, right, they're 12 inches. If it's alive for each, if we're keeping it to live trees, they're going to be fairly big. Part of me would like to have probably more than one tree, depending on the shading, depending on the crown area that's nearby. I guess it depends on.
It's going to depend a lot on the site in terms of what else is there, in terms of if there are existing saplings and such that are going to fill it.
Right.
I suppose another question here is Lincoln had basically as close as possible to the existing thing you're removing. And I guess we'll have to change that if we we want to discourage anything in resource areas or prevent it, which I agree with.
Right. Right. Resource area inappropriate, which can be decided appropriate buffer zone. I mean, I would think that the guideline would be about helping with shading, and this could be sorted out in the field.
Yeah, that.
Yeah. Like we would just need some, I mean, we could just have some general language.
All right, principles.
Yeah.
Anything else? Okay. If not, or our brains are used up.
Yep, they were used up.
We'll get another shot at this once we have at least this, I think, will spec out.
Does this
Yeah,
give
the
you
other
guys
thing is-
enough to work with, or is there anything
Yeah.
else?
No, the other thing is that I guess we have to come up with a form and an FAQ. I guess question is right. I think as to your issue, Jacob, about how many different documents we have versus.
Yeah, I don't want there to be 5 different documents, half of which say the same things over again. I want there to be one document, one packet or something.
I agree. And we'll see what the FAQs are, as well as having some sort of, what is also under the FAQs we can create. And we could all work a little on that, where you create some educational material, because one of the issues is talking about the pruning option. To encourage people to do pruning and encouraging people on that, and so we can make the FAQs could be an area for education.
That almost gets into a larger problem of our website.
Yeah. And what is that something you want to say more about right now, or should I cut you off?
Oh, no, but there's a lot of updates that are needed, and it would definitely benefit from educational information such as this.
Just one question I had about the Lincoln draft. It looked they had a lot of pictures and things that looked like I haven't figured out whether they came from copyrighted sources originally, or if that sort of how it, where we can go for things like that and not run into trouble there.
Well, we could put it on Lincoln by quoting Lincoln, and then say we got it from them, and then defer the problem, or you can call up
Right.
Lincoln, or we can call up Lincoln and ask them. They're very nice, good people.
We can look at the state and the MACC and see if they have appropriate things that we should include there.
Right. But yeah, a lot of these diagrams look even familiar, like they've stolen it from who knows where. If a tree. And yeah, the question is, do we have, once you get into mitigation, you get into this whole issue of whether we suggest anything and have lists of things that, I guess that comes back to our bigger issue of when people are doing mitigation for projects.
I think to be helpful, we're going to have to provide some suggestions about here's some native plants that you should be including. And I do like the idea of suggesting where you can find them.
Yeah, well, Lincoln has that list. And I know you, Carol, have talked about it before, whether we have other lists. And Jean used to have, I can't tell if we have some other lists about this stuff. And it looks like somebody's going to tell us where to do this. Yes, Bill?
Hey, Michael, I just wanted to interject. FYI, I mean, I'm a big fan of Native Plant Trust and Garden in the Woods.
Oh,
And I
yeah.
would point out that a lot of what they plant there is not native, but is correct for the zone. So they might plant something that is native to Pennsylvania, but they'll consider it, a good planting for Garden in the Woods. So I would just say maybe not to be too strict about what you call native.
And why not? I'll
say-
question that. Why are they doing that kind of thing?
Because there may be a limited number of plants that are actually suitable, that are truly native. And so, you know, in order to have a reasonable, you know, landscape, if you like, you know, they've chosen to include plants that are in the right growing zone and in the same, you know, in the mid-Atlantic states and up to the Northeast, but not necessarily native to, let's say, Massachusetts.
I guess that part of their goal is a certain kind of demonstrating diversity.
Well, certainly their mission is to inform people about what's invasive and encourage them to plant other things. And I think their trade-off they felt, and you can think about it, is it's a little too narrow to say it has to be strictly native. It's great to get invasive stuff out and to get appropriate stuff in.
I think what you're referring to, they do a lot of things by ecoregions, which don't necessarily follow like state lines. They have a nice map set up on their website.
But everything there that they're talking about is native to, say, the eastern half of North America.
Oh, they don't eat like, so I think they've even moved away from that because they used to plant lots of things that were like, oh, it was native to like Virginia or whatever. But I don't think I think they're not doing that anymore at Garden in the Woods specifically. They're really going more like ecoregion specific, you know, like.
How does that work with changing climate?
I know this came from, I was at Garden in the Woods with a college classmate who is a professor emeritus of like biology. And he was, we ran into some Garden in the Woods people there and we were inquiring and I was hearing their conversation, but I mean, they try to stay close to New England, you know, New York, Pennsylvania, they don't go really far, you know, away. I'm just making the technical point, if you like, that the plantings aren't necessarily native to Massachusetts or Eastern Massachusetts, but they're considered, at least by them, appropriate.
I guess, you know, I'm not sure why we're getting into this discussion about this, except, I mean, I would say that native should be basically, yeah, to the region, to New England or whatever. And I don't think it's a problem if people plant something from Pennsylvania. I think anything they plant from the Garden in the Woods is fine. It's not like they're having things from New Mexico, like a huge selection of things that are from the Western United States or something like that. Native usually does mean, Michael, native usually does mean native actually to an area. And I have to say that if people wanted to find out whether a species is native, they can go on GoBotany. And I'm pretty sure that the maps show the original native range. So if we wanted to say that it was native to Massachusetts, people could make that selection at the Garden in the Woods. They could choose which ones are native to Massachusetts. It would be easy to do.
The question is, what are we going to, but I think Bill's arguing that it's what native to what area? And the question, do we make it native to Massachusetts or do we make it native to the Northeast? And
I would say
things are all changing.
I would say make it native to the Northeast because they're changing.
I'm fine with either one. I think making it easier for people is probably better.
Okay, we will be a little bit more, we'll have to be a little bit more specific. On one hand, it argues that, right, when we say native plants, I never thought about, right, native to what region per se. We've always talked about native plants, but we've never actually defined it as to.
I know there's a whole different ball of wax they open up with that in terms of what does native mean. You have to define time scale as well.
Yeah, I actually just planted a tree that fits into this category in my yard.
Yeah.
Which is a pawpaw, which is not, as far as I can tell, native to Massachusetts recently, but it is native to New York, and the range is probably moving northwards.
Right.
Okay, so is the general consensus here that we will have a broad definition of native?
Yes.
Semi-broad, yes. I'm like, you could say ecoregion 59, like, you know, the Northeast-ish.
Figure out some wording that will come out. We will debate the wording again because it's going to be a blank and we're going to put in something and then people will react then. But obviously it's an interesting issue now because I'm even looking at what Lincoln has and they say for a complete whatever, go to the nativeplanttrust.org. So they give a specific link. And I don't know whether that link, what the definition of the native to what area is under the Native Planting Trust. I don't know, is that something that anybody
think
here
that-
knows about?
I don't, I think, or go ahead, Karen.
No, I was gonna say, I mean, I'll say one thing, when I'm at the Native Plant Trust, their plants are pretty close. I mean, yes, they stray a little bit away from Massachusetts, but not a whole heck of a lot. That's my vibe from what I know of the actual, like the original native plants. So by the way, I'm looking at it, says we offer a wide selection of plants native to New England, which I think is actually safer than the Northeast to say native to New England.
Even though, so that doesn't include New York or Pennsylvania. New York, let's say New York's on the same latitude. That doesn't include New York. Yes, they talk about.
Well, it does say as well some species and varieties from across the eastern US that appear in the living collections that garden in the woods. That's interesting. Yeah.
They're fighting to save New England's native plants.
I mean, I think they're probably saying it's native to New England is safer really, and also is certainly better for the ecosystem, because if it's native to New England, you're going to have, you know, the birds and the critters and everything else is going to be able to rely on it better.
Yeah, but birds move around. They've seen everything as they migrate up and down. They've tasted trees of different places, but I see what you mean.
Yeah, I wouldn't assume that. I mean, birds have niches too.
I think it's fine to rely on the professional judgment of the Native Plant Trust. I mean, we can just take a look at whatever link they provided for Lincoln. But if you go
they
to
literally went to that one place. They went to nativeplanttrust.org. That's
just okay, just the general website, because they have a plant finder app. So they have a plant finder on their website. So
okay.
Yeah.
Any other issues? Okay. Anything else? Sorry to cut it off that way, but I will cut it off and say that we have 3 minutes to 10. So let's see. Joyce, is Joyce still around?
Yeah,
I can see on the thing there. What?
I have nothing.
Okay. No, I just, oh, there you are. Sorry, with my
she didn't
screen.
go anywhere.
I had to go look for something turquoise. Did you have any site issues or questions? It's a
I did
normal
not.
question. Okay. Okay. Does anybody else have anything before we adjourn? Okay, not that we can have too many things, given that's not on the agenda. Okay, then at 9:58, I move to adjourn at 9:58.
Okay.
Okay, any discussion? Okay, Michael, I. Jacob,
Aye.
Carol,
Aye.
Courtney,
I
Matt.
Aye.
Okay, we are adjourned.